Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo.
So I would say right away, this suggests that we need worship, we need liturgy just because we're human, because we don't want to live just on one level all the time. We want it to percolate up at times. We need our high moments, our peak experiences, the good times when we sort of can bring it together, know a greater sense of integration.
Today on Reflections, Father Bacik talks with Reverend Rob Seidner, who is pastor of St. Charles Church in Lima, Ohio. Father Bacik and Father Seidner will discuss worship and time. And now, here is Father Bacik.
Rob, I thank you for being willing to come on the program with me here. I've listened to you talk in the past about the question of liturgy and been impressed. I know that's been part of your professional study, that did some your master's degree at Notre Dame, and that you've continued to stay up to date with things liturgical. I think that's important. It isn't just to get a degree in something, but I know you have a genuine interest in the liturgy and a real care for it. And that's one of the reasons that I want to speak with you about the whole question of liturgy and time. Now, one of my senses is that we talk about liturgy in too narrow a fashion very often. In other words, we want to limit it to, well, here's what happens in the church, and we've got these 7 sacraments, and we do this and that. And it seems to me that it is helpful to begin to talk about liturgy in some broader context. There's a lot of ways you could do that. You could start out with sort of an anthropological understanding of things. That is, let's just talk about human nature in general and how people throughout all of history have needed to ritualize their important moments or points. You could do it sort of in a large religious context. You could get anthropologists to help you to see, well, how have people worshipped throughout history, and how have they dealt with time, and so on. You could do it in a generally ecumenical context. What could we learn about it from our Protestant friends about liturgy? But the major point I'm making is that there seems to be a lot of broad ways to approach the question of liturgy that can enrich it, and not just beginning by saying, well, we have 7 sacraments, and here they are outward signs instituted by Christ to give grace, and this is how we ought to work at them. So I want to let's just talk about those broader approaches for a few minutes to liturgy. You tend to agree with the kind of thing I'm saying there?
Oh, very much so. We need to be very broad. The liturgy that we celebrate as a people in gathering on the Lord's Day particularly is meant to highlight the whole life that we're supposed to be living as a act of praise, an act of worship of God. Our whole lives are an act of worship.
Yeah, that begins to broaden it out right there, so that one way of saying that, I suppose, is that we must relate liturgy and life. I'm sitting here talking about liturgy, Rob, and it strikes me that to some people that's sort of a foreign word. Maybe we ought to say just a little bit about what that word means and its derivations and so on. You want to comment on that?
I'd be happy to. It's a Greek root, liturgia, meaning the public work of a people or of an individual. It referred in non-Christian times to a benefaction that someone would do on behalf of the people of Athens, putting up a monument or that type of thing. Something that was for the common good. It was Christianized by the Church to express the public worship of this people of faith.
So the characteristics are that liturgy is public, and it is communal. It's something we do together, and it has certain guidelines for it. You don't just do liturgy any way you want to. It's the public worship of the Church, and there are official books which guide us in doing it, although they give us a certain amount of flexibility these days, which I think is a healthy development. But still, part of the importance of ritual is that there is repetitive action, so that we get to know what's coming, and that sort of is supposed to free us up to pray better, to enter into the whole spirit of the public worship and so on. So it does have that communal public character.
I think there's also another aspect to the ritual of that brings us deeper, and that it gets us in touch with our origins more, with earlier times, and not only with earlier times, but with the great events of our faith that have given foundation and give direction and vision to us, that if we were just making it up week after week, we would be losing a sense of very often. It would become too individualistic. It would no longer be communal in that rich sense.
So liturgy is really forming us into a people, keeping us in touch with our roots. It's our way of carrying on the tradition. It's our way of continuing to reinterpret our sacred scriptures. All of that is part of what liturgy does for us. It creates a people. It makes us into a community.
Here and now,
right?
Which is what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Discovering the presence and the action and the wonders of God at work in us, in this place, in this time.
Okay, let's direct our attention now to the question of liturgy and time, specifically. I could start with the framework I said at the beginning, that you can approach this question from sort of a broad human understanding. And the first thing I'd say is that in our lives, we need our important moments. We need life to be punctuated by special times where we can celebrate, that are sort of lifted above the ordinary, where we can see what the rest of it is all about. So that time that's just nothing but sameness gets very dull. We need the special moments. And so we know that the birth of a child, people want to celebrate. They celebrate weddings. That's a time when now two lives are being joined. We often need to celebrate, in a sense, or gather when people are ill, and we need to be with them as they deal with their last days and so on. So as you look through any person's history and any group's history, there has to be the special moments when important things are happening, when more significant events are occurring, and therefore we need to sort of get hold of them, to grab hold and see what their meaning is all about. So I would say right away, this suggests that we need worship, we need liturgy, just because we're human, because we don't want to live just on one level all the time. We want it to percolate up at times. We need our high moments, our peak experiences, the good times when we sort of can bring it together, know a greater sense of integration.
Joseph Pieper is the great philosopher who has spoken particularly about this, the importance of festivity in our lives. Not as escape, which is one of the difficulties we're facing today, but festivity as something that takes us out of ourselves and, in fact, roots us more, or helps us to see the overall vision of our lives and get a perspective on it again.
So festivity, yes, celebration, it's part of what it means to be human.
Very much so.
We need that. I mean, even think of the special family meals at Thanksgiving or at Christmas time. We seem to look forward to some of those things. There are a sense of anticipation connected with them, but also there's the sense of memory, like remember other Thanksgiving meals and how we did it then, and so that becomes this special time. And liturgy, of course, does that. That is why we would gather weekly to celebrate the Eucharist, for example, the Lord's Supper. It seems as though we need to repeat that action periodically. That Sunday, therefore, is supposed to be a special day. It's the day God worked for 6 days, as the Scriptures say, and then rested on the seventh. So the idea of having a Sabbath or a holy day seems to be, again, in all religious traditions. You need the special time.
There's a very special difference for us Christians with Sunday as our gathering day, though. For liturgy. It moves us quite beyond the Jewish experience of a rest day only. For us, we gather on the Lord's Day because it is that. It is the day that we discovered Jesus is Lord. It is the day of His resurrection. All the gospel accounts of the resurrection make clear that Jesus rose on the first day of the week, which is our Sunday now. So it's a terribly important anthropological, theological, mythic experience going on here. It's not just any day of the week that the Church has, in fact, chosen. It's a particular day that has a tremendous meaning for us.
Again, it is rooted in history. That's an important thing for us to remember about Christianity. It's an historical religion. It's time-bound religion. It's God appearing in history in a special way at a certain time, and there are events that are recalled. And so it is very concrete, earthy, social, communal, time-bound religion in many ways. And that's an important thing for us to remember. Therefore, part of what we would say out of that context is that liturgy can never be just totally an escape from time, an escape from history, an escape from daily life. It shouldn't function that way.
It's quite the opposite.
Exactly. It's supposed to help us to make sacred the rest of time. It's to help us to live more effectively in history. That is that relationship, again, between liturgy and life, so that eternity meets us in time, but we remain time-bound creatures. Resurrection, of course, is the focal point of all of that for us.
Yes, it took place at a particular moment, or the believers, those first followers of Jesus, experienced the Lord as risen, as having overcome death and having overcome sin. They experienced that at a particular moment, and yet that took them, why it was so important, it took them beyond time. They realized that they were made for eternity, that they were already having a taste of a future life that would never end in Jesus, having overcome time and space in his resurrection. He was living on a new plane.
Well put, well put. I would like to go back, well, just to summarize this major point we're making here, that we can look at liturgy and time from the broad viewpoint of human nature and how we function. And I think what we're saying is we need our special times. That makes life more interesting. It gives a zest to it. Those higher moments can light up the darker moments that we all have to deal with. So that we have liturgy so that it sanctifies our everyday life. We go to church on Sunday so that we're able to live on Monday as Christian people, bring a measure of charity and to work for justice throughout the rest of the week. Now that sort of relationship seems important. Let me then go to the second sort of thing I suggested. That is that we can look at this question of liturgy and worship and time from the viewpoint of the broad religious understanding of things that we've seen throughout history. There's a helpful book by R088 called The Sacred and the Profane, and he talks as a chapter in there on the question of time, along with a lot of other topics. But on time, he goes into quite detail about the traditional cultures, or the more primitive cultures, and the way they understood time and their ritual. And roughly it goes like this, that in the beginning, in those days, all the days of the gods, all the important things were done. The gods did all the important actions, made all the important things, and so on. And that what we're doing now in history is sort of reliving what the gods have done. We're playing it out. In a sense, time is going downhill. History is sort of in a circle. It's a
returning to its beginnings again and again.
So the reason you have ritual in that culture, or in those primitive cultures, is to stop the downward flow of time for a while, to stop history and to circle it back to those important events that had happened in the beginning. It's like we're running out of energy, so we better go back and do that. That's why they had the New Year's festivals. They would have the great liturgical feast, so to get in touch with the gods who had made everything fruitful in the beginning, so that gods again could make fruitful the crops for this year. So that was one sort of primitive notion of liturgy. You get a feeling, at least, that there's a certain escapism in it, or at least that, well, there's really nothing new happening in this world. It all happened at the beginning. And I think if we turn to our Jewish friends, we find them making one of the great discoveries in the whole history of religious thought. They began to see history in a new way. They met God in history. Time was now important. Time was the opportunity to not just to repeat the old, but to discover the new as well. Yes. We're moving forward, and God is doing new and often surprising things in our history. Therefore, in this context, liturgy has a little different sense. It's not just hearkening back to the past, but is also looking ahead to the future, and it is celebrating in the present what new things God might be doing for us. So that's roughly the way I would look at this question of a broad religious approach to liturgy and time. And I think in our Christian setting, when you look at all that, you say, well, we want to make sure when we celebrate liturgy that it's not an escape from everyday time, that it is somehow rooting us in that and helping us mind the riches of the ordinary experience and preparing us for whatever new things might occur.
Yes.
You want to comment at all on that, Rob?
I think the point you've made about the breakthrough with Jewish faith, seeing time itself as a place where we would experience God's action in new and surprising ways is really key. We often speak of that as time being understood as linear, and revelation, God's action, is linear in the world. It happens in this place, in this time, these events.
Yeah, that word linear suggests that time and history is going someplace, that it has a direction, that it will reach its fulfillment, that we're moving towards, that paradise isn't just something that happened back then in the days of the gods, so that we are not just to be nostalgic about the past, but that we are to be people with a future orientation, with the sense that eventually God will make history come to its fulfillment, that He will right all of the wrongs, and that this whole process that we're involved in can be trusted because God's in charge of it and will bring it to its proper goal one day. So again, that takes us out of a nostalgic mode and puts us more into one of anticipation for the future. So that linear thing is helpful, although I suppose we might want to refine that at times. I've heard you talk before about saying, well, you have more of a cyclic, a spiral. Spiral. Why don't you talk about that spiral idea a bit?
Well, Jesus said again and again that the kingdom is among you. I think it's that's much more not a place thing so much as a time thing he's speaking about. An experience of here and now being in God and with God and finding our way toward the kingdom, which is the fullness of God's work when that will come about. That's already happening now. So we speak of our lives as Christians, both within and without the liturgy, as an experience of the already but the not yet. That we have genuine experience of being the Lord's people and being saved, being redeemed, and yet that isn't complete. It's ongoing. So we speak of our experience as being a spiral one of being already God's people but moving toward the kingdom still, yet to be completed.
Some of my imagery of Jesus connects in with that. I have the picture of Him as sort of walking rapidly at times and telling people, you better come on, keep up with me, let the dead bury the dead, leave the nets, leave the fishing business, leave the boats, come and follow me now. Now's the moment of decision. We're moving someplace. We got work to do. There is that urgency. That's not the only message of Jesus. Right. There's another side to Jesus that's more mellow and slow-paced and present to people, but there is that immediacy about it. The kingdom is here. Make a decision. Don't fool around. Don't wait till tomorrow. Decide now. And I think that's part of our sense of time as Christians as well.
I think that highlights so strongly that we're not talking just about ongoing human perfectibility. We're talking about an experience of the other, of a wonderful and powerful God, an infinite God who is meeting us here and calling us beyond ourselves. You said earlier our experience of God doing surprising things now. That urgency, I think, gives good expression to that. That God is calling us beyond our present understanding of our history or of our life or what we ought to be doing with it. Often demands that we move on.
Rob, let's begin to relate this more clearly to our Christian understanding of liturgy and how we see it and so on. A lot of directions come to my mind: the sanctification of our day, of our week, our liturgical year. You could talk a lot about all of that. Let me try an idea out on you that I sometimes think about liturgy as sort of stop action. Now, this is playing to a different kind of human experience, and that is, a lot of times our life seems so hectic and frenzied, and we got so much to do, and we're busy, pulls and tugs in all different directions, and to go to Mass on Sunday, for many people, I think, is a moment of repose. It's a moment of stepping out of all of that. It's 1 hour when we can sort of be quiet or where we can do something else, where the rat race doesn't just take us over. I like to think of it sometimes as stop action. And the stop action is designed not again as an escape, but to gather ourselves, to make sense out of what already happened, and then to prepare ourselves to live more effectively in the future. But you need the stop action. You need the hour away to gather one's forces. I really believe a lot of people do that when they go to Mass. Maybe they don't think of it that way, but they bring their hurts and wounds of the week, their sorrows and their joys, and sort of offer them up and sort of get the batteries charged again so they can go back out and battle the world as they know it. Stop action.
As long as we don't misunderstand that, as you said it well, as trying to escape, even escaping religiously into our own, there is that tendency among the Christian people when we come together on Sunday. Some people want to pray all by themselves. They don't want to be caught up in singing and in responding. They just like to have a nice quiet Mass, the way we used to have 30 years ago. That's a misunderstanding of liturgy as this action of the whole people, and yet it is meant to be nourishing and calming and stop action in the sense of gaining that perspective again for our lives, this transcendent perspective.
I wonder, too, if even if the moments of silence we have in the liturgy doesn't play into this as well. I don't think we've learned to do that well.
I agree with
Sometimes at the beginning of the Mass I'll say we're going to take 1 minute of silence, exactly 1 minute, so that people know how long it's going to be, and they can sort of pace themselves or try to get into it or not waste the whole time. But there's something frightening about an indefinite period of time there. When's the silence going to end? And you know, it's sort of anxiety-producing in many ways. But I mean, it would seem to me good liturgy needs a sense of silence as well as a sense of singing together, for example.
Very much so. And there has to be a balance and a rhythm between those things. Both are ways of experiencing the presence and the call of the Lord.
You know, your word rhythm is probably an important one here, that liturgy requires rhythm. There's a pace and a flow.
Which the ritual is meant to help or sustain.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, Rob, let's any of these other ways that you want to talk about liturgy and time. I had thrown out the idea of the pray always idea. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, that's just such an important pronouncement of Jesus. He said, pray always. And I think our liturgy and a number of different lifestyles in the church are an attempt to respond to that. I'm thinking of the monastic life as one radical kind of response to what it means to pray always, to live in this world with always a strong connection to the Lord. That's one that is not going to call a great many people, but it's one that remains significant to anybody who gets in touch with it. They find themselves inspired by the monastic life that literally is an attempt to pray always, whether they're at work or whether they're formally in the church doing the liturgy of the hours. They're trying to pray always. We, in the world, have a different sense of that, I think, and they're both legitimate.
Yeah, well, I mean, we probably need to talk about that, because, I mean, we can't say that Jesus' admonition to pray always is meant only for monks. It must mean something for the rest of us who got busy schedules and all of that. And, I mean, part of what it suggests, I think, is this abiding attitude of dependence on God.
Yes.
To walk around through one's day sort of realizing that I'm not on center stage, even though I think I am at times, that I don't function without this one we call our God, that there's a deeper meaning and purpose in what I do. Seems all of those kind of perceptions are part of what it would mean to pray always, be a person in tune with the benign mystery that's running this whole world.
Yes, very
so
good.
So pray always would be something that for all of us and not just for monks. What about, do you want to move in any direction on the weekly celebration? Let me try that. It does strike me that, you know, we've got a law in the Catholic community. We're supposed to go to Mass every week, and I'm sure people got different rhythms for this and different needs along that line. But I would think that all of us have some need to repeat the liturgical experience periodically, that you can't just do it once and say you've done it. The very purpose of it is to try to help us focus on how God is at work in our world all the time. That begins to change. Our experiences change. We change. It just seems as though there's some kind of rhythm here that says I ought to worship periodically. I ought to come back in touch with the Lord in an explicit and clear way.
Yes.
So maybe we can argue somehow, for a periodic celebrations of the liturgy for everybody, and not just because we got a law.
I would argue very strongly for it, but I would not easily give up Sunday as the day, while granting that that's impossible for many people of goodwill. It just doesn't work with their schedules. But we know that from the beginning of the church, the greatest part of the community of believers has gathered weekly on Sunday, on the Lord's Day, because not only it was periodic and they knew it was important to do, but because they had a profound sense that the Lord, the risen one, met them there on that day, that day already was taking them out of their present life and into the kingdom, and into paradise, into the Lord's kingdom.
Yeah, I think you gave your rationale very well for that before, and I think that is well taken. It's a very historical sense here of
and the Eucharist,
what our religion is all about.
And the Eucharist, which is the great action, the great liturgy, the great worship rite of the people on the Lord's Day, precisely connects us to that experience of Jesus as the one who has died and is risen. That's the memorial of that death and rising. Jesus at the Last Supper said, "This is my body and blood given for you. Do this in memory of me." They only understood that in the light of the resurrection, that great event. So every Sunday when we gather and celebrate the Eucharist, we discover ourselves, or at least maybe once in a while do, to be already at the Lord's table in the kingdom. We're before the Lord at the eternal banquet, or have a taste of what we are looking forward to.
That's an important element of all this. Rob, in just a few seconds, is there any other major ideas that you wanted to get in? I had mentioned the liturgical year. That's another way we find rhythm and so on in the whole thing, that it seems good to have a Lenten season periodically, because we might just forget to do any penance. And there it all bombards upon us. And, everyone's saying do penance. We got Ash Wednesday and all of that. It seems to fit our rhythms again. It corrects maybe faulty rhythms. So we could say the same for Advent and the other major seasons.
Yes, the liturgical year, again, puts us in touch with a rhythm of God's own action in us, of God's call and our response.
Good. You've linked up liturgy and life again very well. I like that. Well, Rob, we've been talking about worship and time, liturgy and history. And I think we try to see it in various ways. As human beings, we need to have life punctuated by important moments, high points, where we can really celebrate. And it seems as though all religious traditions have had a sense of making something sacred out of time. And then we look at our specifically Christian situation, we say, here we got an historical religion, Jesus an historical figure, the resurrection celebrated on Sunday, and also we gather together for our Eucharist, our Lord's Supper, and in the midst of all of that, we continue to try to find God's presence and find the energy and strength to live it out in daily life.
You've been listening to Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo. Today, Father Bacik talked with Reverend Rob Seidner, who is pastor of St. Charles Church in Lima, Ohio. The topic of this week's Reflections was worship and time. If you have any comments on today's show or suggestions for future programs, please write Father James Bacik, Catholic Campus Ministry, 2086 Brookdale Drive, Toledo, Ohio 43606. Funding for this program was provided by the Catholic Communications Commission of the Diocese of Toledo.